The first snow of winter had begun to fall when Verity saw the stranger. She had come to the Thornwood crossing at dawn, as she always did, to gather whatever herbs still clung to life beneath the frost. It was a pitiful harvest. A handful of wintergreen, some dried yarrow that had escaped the cold, barely enough to trade for salt, let alone the grain she desperately needed. The crossing was busier than usual. Merchants hurried their carts through before the mountain passes became impassable, and travelers pressed northward with the anxious energy of those racing against the season. No one paid attention to the figure slumped against the old boundary stone. At first, Verity thought he was dead. He sat with his back against the weathered granite, legs stretched uselessly before him, head bowed so low his dark hair obscured his face. His clothes had once been fine, she could see that much from the quality of the wool, now torn and filthy, but it was his stillness that made her pause. The absolute, defeated stillness of someone who had stopped expecting help. A merchant's cart rolled past, close enough that the wheel nearly crushed his outstretched hand. The driver didn't even glance down. Verity knew she should keep walking. She was nobody here, less than nobody. A rejected Omega without pack or protection, surviving on the edges of territory that had once been her home. The last thing she needed was to draw attention to herself, but she couldn't look away from his hands. They were broad and calloused, the hands of someone accustomed to work or weapons, and they were shaking. Not from cold, she realized, but from the effort of holding himself upright. Whatever had happened to this man, he was fighting just to remain conscious. Out of the way, Omega, the voice made Verity's spine stiffen. She turned to find Draven standing behind her, his enforcer's mark gleaming silver at his throat. He was flanked by 2 other wolves from the Ashmore pack, the pack that had cast her out 3 years ago. Draven, she said carefully, keeping her eyes lowered in the submissive posture that had become second nature. Still skulking around the borders, I see. His lip curled with familiar contempt. I thought the ferals would have eaten you by now. I keep to myself. I cause no trouble. Your existence is trouble. Draven's gaze slid to the stranger against the stone. What's this? Found yourself a broken human to keep you company? One of his companions laughed and walked over to the slumped figure. He prodded the stranger's leg with his boot. Cripple, can you even walk? The stranger didn't respond. Didn't even lift his head. Must have been dumped here by a passing cart, Draven observed. Too useless to keep, too pathetic to kill properly. Almost like you, Verity. The enforcer's companion drew back his foot to kick the stranger's ribs. The blow landed with a sound that made Verity's stomach turn. Stop. The word escaped before she could catch it. Draven's eyebrows rose. Did you just give me an order? Verity's pulse raced, but she forced herself to step forward. He's injured. He's no threat to anyone. He's in our territory without permission. He's at a public crossing. He has the right to passage like anyone else. Draven moved closer, and Verity had to fight every instinct screaming at her to flee. He was taller than her by nearly a head, his presence radiating the dominant energy that made her Omega nature want to cower. You have no rights here, he said softly. You have no pack, no alpha, no protection. The only reason you're still breathing is because I allow it. His eyes dropped to the small pouch at her hip. What's in the bag? Nothing. Herbs. And, Verity swallowed. Some food. For trading. Give it to me. She hesitated, and Draven's hand shot out to grab her wrist. His grip was crushing, deliberately painful. I said give it to me. With trembling fingers, Verity reached into her pouch and withdrew the small bundle wrapped in cloth. Her last food, dried venison, and 2 pieces of hard bread. She'd been saving them for 3 days, rationing carefully, knowing it might be a week before she could acquire more. Draven took the bundle and examined its contents with a dismissive snort. Pathetic. He tossed it into the mud at the stranger's feet. There. Now you're both equally worthless. His companions laughed as the 3 of them walked away, their voices fading into the noise of the crossing. Verity stood frozen, watching her only food sink slowly into the churned earth. Then she looked at the stranger. He had lifted his head. His eyes were pale gray, the color of winter storms, and they were fixed on her face with an intensity that made the air still in her lungs. There was no vacancy in that gaze, no weakness. Whatever his body's condition, his mind was sharp and fully present, and watching her with something that looked almost like recognition. The moment stretched between them. Then the stranger's gaze dropped to the food in the mud, and slowly, painfully, he reached for it. Don't. Verity knelt beside him, plucking the bundle from the mire before he could grasp it. She wiped the worst of the mud away with her sleeve, salvaging what she could. You shouldn't eat dirt along with it. She held out the cleaned portion to him. He stared at her hand as if it were a foreign thing. "Take it," she said quietly. "You need it more than I do." "Why?" His voice was rough from disuse, barely more than a rasp, but the single word carried weight. "Because you're hungry. Because I can forage more tomorrow. Because—" She stopped, unsure how to explain the hollow ache in her chest that demanded she help him despite every rational argument against it. The stranger's eyes searched her face. Then, with visible effort, he reached out and took the food from her palm. Their fingers brushed, and Verity felt something pass between them. A current of warmth, a flicker of recognition that made no sense. For just an instant, she could have sworn his gray eyes flashed with molten gold. Then he blinked, and they were slate-colored again, and she told herself she had imagined it. "What's your name?" she asked. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Kale?" he finally said. "Just Kale. I'm Verity." She glanced around the crossing, at the indifferent travelers and the falling snow. "You'll freeze to death here by morning. Can you walk at all?" Kale's jaw tightened with something that might have been shame. "My legs are damaged. I can manage short distances. Nothing more." Verity made her decision before her better judgment could intervene. "My cottage isn't far," she said. "I can tend your injuries there, at least until the snow passes." Those winter-pale eyes studied her with an intensity that felt like being seen straight through to the bone. "You would help a stranger," Kale said slowly. "A crippled nobody with nothing to offer you." "You're a person," Verity replied simply. "That's enough." Something changed in his expression. Something that looked almost like pain, though she couldn't understand why her words would wound him. "Lead the way then, Verity," he said quietly. "I'll do my best to keep up." The walk to Verity's cottage should have taken 20 minutes. It took nearly an hour. Kale moved with agonizing slowness. His body bent around whatever injuries plagued him. Verity had offered her shoulder for support, and he had accepted with a reluctance that suggested he was unused to depending on anyone. His weight against her side was substantial. Whatever had broken him, it hadn't diminished his size. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and beneath the tattered clothing, she could feel the remnants of considerable strength. "What happened to you?" she wondered, but didn't ask. Some wounds weren't meant to be probed by strangers. "You live alone?" Kale asked as her cottage came into view through the trees. "Yes." "No pack? No family?" The questions were carefully neutral, but Verity heard the curiosity beneath them. "I was cast out," she said, keeping her voice steady. 3 years ago." "For what crime?" Verity's steps faltered slightly before she recovered. "For being what I am." Kale said nothing more, but she felt his gaze on the side of her face, measuring, calculating. For a crippled stranger, he had remarkably observant eyes. The cottage was small but solid. Verity had built most of it herself from salvaged timber and stones cleared from the forest floor. It wasn't much. A single room with a sleeping pallet, a hearth, a table with one chair, but it was hers, and it was warm, and it kept the wilderness at bay. "Here." She guided Kale to the pallet, the only comfortable surface available. He sank down with a barely suppressed groan, and in the hearthlight, she got her first clear look at his injuries. Her chest tightened. His legs weren't merely damaged. They were wrapped in crude bandages that had soaked through with dark stains, and the skin visible above the wrappings was mottled with bruising so severe it was nearly black. But it was the wounds themselves that made her stomach clench. The injuries looked deliberate, methodical, as if someone had systematically tried to cripple him. "Who did this to you?" The question emerged before she could stop it. Kale's expression shuddered. "It doesn't matter. These wounds could fester. You could lose your legs entirely. Then I'll lose them." His voice held such flat resignation that Verity felt anger spark in her chest. "That's not acceptable. I'm a healer. Let me help you." "A healer?" Kale's eyes sharpened. "What kind of healer?" "The ordinary kind. Herbs, poultices. Nothing." She caught herself, choosing her words carefully. "Nothing unusual." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She turned away to gather her supplies, acutely aware of his gaze tracking her movements. The cottage suddenly felt too small, the air too close. Something about this stranger's presence made her pulse quicken in ways she couldn't explain. "Why were you cast out?" His question startled her. She nearly dropped the pot she was filling with water. "I told you. For being what I am. An omega. A defective omega." The word still stung, even after all this time. "I'm wolfless." Silence fell. Verity refused to turn around, focusing on hanging the pot over the hearth. "Wolfless," Kale repeated slowly. "You cannot shift." "I've never been able to. My wolf never manifested." She hated the shame that crept into her voice. I have the Omega nature, but none of the instincts. No heat cycles. No ability to bond. The pack elders declared me broken. Useless for breeding. A waste of resources. She finally turned to face him. So they sent me away to die. Only I didn't die. Kael's expression had grown unreadable. And the enforcer? Draven? He was supposed to be my mate. The words hung in the air. He was the one who argued loudest for my exile. Verity continued flatly. He said bonding to a wolf-less Omega would be shameful, would weaken his position. The pack alpha agreed. She began sorting through her dried herbs with hands that weren't quite steady. So here I am, packless, mateless, surviving. You're more than surviving. Kael's voice was soft. You built this cottage. You've created a life here. You showed compassion to a stranger when you had nothing to spare. He paused. That's not survival. That's strength. Verity looked up, startled by the warmth in his tone. Their eyes met across the small space, and again she felt that strange current pass between them. A pull, a recognition. You should rest, she said, forcing herself to look away. I'll prepare a poultice for your legs. Verity. She paused. Thank you, Kael said quietly, for everything. She nodded without turning around, afraid of what her face might reveal if she looked at him again. As she worked, grinding herbs and mixing remedies, she could feel him watching her. The weight of his attention was like sunlight through glass. Warm but concentrated. What are you really? She wondered. What are you hiding behind those eyes? Outside, the snow fell harder, and the wind began to howl through the trees. But inside her cottage, with a stranger who felt inexplicably familiar, Verity had never felt less alone. She didn't notice that his breathing had grown deeper and more relaxed. She didn't notice how his eyes had begun to glow faintly gold in the firelight. And she didn't notice the shadow that passed by her window, watching. Verity woke in the dead of night to the sound of growling. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. The sound was low and resonant, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and she saw Kael. He was still on her pallet, but his body had gone rigid, muscles locked in some kind of seizure. His head was thrown back, tendons standing out sharply on his neck, and his eyes were open and blazing gold. Kael. Verity scrambled toward him. Kael, can you hear me? The growling intensified. It wasn't coming from outside, she realized with a chill. It was coming from his chest. She reached for him without thinking, pressing her hand to his forehead. His skin was burning hot, fever-slick with sweat, but the moment her palm touched him, his hand shot up and seized her wrist with crushing strength. Don't. His voice was guttural, barely human. Stay away. You're burning up. Let me help. You don't understand. His golden eyes found hers, and the raw anguish in them stole her breath. I can't control it. The wolf. It's been caged too long, starved. And you, he inhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring. You smell like moonlight, like home. I can't. His body convulsed, and Verity watched in horror as something moved beneath his skin. Ripples of muscle that shouldn't be possible, bones that seemed to shift and resettle. Run, Kael gasped. Please, before I... But Verity didn't run. Instead, she did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She reached for the empty place inside herself where her wolf should have been, the hollow space she had learned to ignore. And for the first time in her life, something answered. Warmth flooded through her veins, not painful but electric. Alive. Her palm, still pressed to Kael's forehead, began to glow with soft silver light. Kael's convulsions slowed, his breathing steadied, and beneath her hand, she felt his fever begin to break. How? His voice was barely audible, the gold fading from his eyes. You said you were wolfless. I am, Verity whispered, staring at her own luminous hand. I don't know what this is, but even as she spoke, she felt something else stirring, a presence at the edge of her consciousness, feminine and ancient and utterly patient, as if it had been waiting her entire life for this moment. Daughter, something whispered inside her mind. Finally, you call for me. Kael was struggling to sit up, his expression transformed. The wary stranger was gone, replaced by something almost reverent. He reached toward her face, stopping just short of touching her. Luminary, he breathed. You're a luminary. A what? The healers of legend. Wolves blessed by the moon goddess herself. They've been extinct for centuries. His hand trembled in the space between them. The old texts say their touch could cure any wound, that their light could call even the most feral wolves back from madness. That's not possible. I'm nobody. You saved me. Kale's voice cracked. My wolf was breaking free. Another moment and I would have torn you apart. But your light pushed him back, made him submit. His eyes searched her face with wonder. Do you understand what this means? What you are? Verity's head was spinning. Too much was happening too fast. The silver glow had faded from her hands, but she could still feel that presence inside her. The wolf that wasn't a wolf. The power that had slept for 23 years. Why was your wolf breaking free? She asked, grasping for solid ground. What happened to you? Kale's expression flickered. For a moment, she saw something guarded pass across his features. Then he seemed to make a decision. I was betrayed, he said quietly. Someone I trusted poisoned me with a serum that separates wolf from man. It's been weeks since I could shift properly. The wolf is trapped inside me, growing more desperate by the hour. He looked down at his bandaged legs. The injuries are real, but they're a symptom, not a cause. My body is at war with itself. Is there a cure? There was rumored to be one. An old remedy that requires... He stopped abruptly, his eyes fixing on something behind her. Verity turned. A figure stood in her doorway. The door she was certain she had barred now hung open, letting in swirls of snow and bitter cold. The figure stepped inside, and Verity's blood turned to ice. Hello, little Omega. Draven's smile gleamed in the darkness. I knew if I followed you long enough, you'd eventually reveal your secret. 2 more wolves emerged from the shadows behind him. They weren't in human form. Take the stranger, Draven ordered casually. Kill him if he resists. His eyes fixed on Verity with predatory hunger. But the luminary comes with me. Kale moved faster than any crippled man should have been able to. He lunged in front of Verity, positioning his broken body between her and the threat. You'll have to go through me first, he snarled. Draven laughed. That's the idea. The wolves attacked. The first wolf lunged for Kale's throat. Even wounded, even broken, he moved with a warrior's instinct. He caught the beast mid-leap, using its own momentum to hurl it sideways into the hearth. Sparks exploded across the cottage floor, but the second wolf was already circling, and Kale's legs buckled beneath him. He crashed to one knee with a snarl of pain. Pathetic. Draven stepped closer, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. The mighty stranger can barely stand. And here I thought the wolf-less Omega had found herself a protector. The ancient voice within Verity was stirring again, responding to her terror with something that felt like fury. Daughter, it whispered. They threaten what is yours. Will you let them? Stay behind me, Kale growled, struggling to rise. You can barely move. I can still fight. Not against 3 of them. Not like this. The first wolf had recovered from the hearth and was stalking toward them, flames reflected in its yellow eyes. Draven's smile widened as his 2 enforcers closed the circle. I've waited years for this, Draven said softly. Do you know how humiliating it was? Being bonded to a defective Omega? The pack laughed behind my back, called me cursed. His expression twisted with old hatred. But a luminary? That changes everything. The pack elders will beg me to take you back. You'll be the most valuable Omega in 1,000 miles. I'd rather die, Verity said. That can be arranged. After you've served your purpose. He lunged for her. What happened next came from somewhere beyond thought. Verity thrust her hands forward, and light erupted from her palms, not the soft silver glow of before, but a blinding radiance that filled the cottage like captured moonlight. Draven screamed, staggering backward with his hands over his eyes. The 2 wolves yelped and scrambled for the door, their predatory confidence shattered, but the light didn't stop there. It poured from Verity in waves, washing over Kale like a tide. She watched in amazement as the color returned to his face, as his broken posture straightened, as the bruises visible above his bandages began to fade. Heal him, the voice urged. Finish what you started. Verity dropped to her knees beside Kale, pressing her glowing hands to his damaged legs. The power flowed through her without effort, as natural as breathing. She could feel his wounds beneath her palms, torn muscle, fractured bone, and something else. Something dark and foreign that had wrapped itself around his wolf like chains. She pushed against the darkness, and it recoiled from her light. For a fleeting instant, she felt his thoughts brush against hers gratitude, wonder, and something fiercer beneath. The contact was brief but undeniable, a whisper of connection that promised more. Kale gasped, his back arching. His eyes blazed gold, but this time, there was no madness in them, only wonder. Verity. Her name on his lips was half prayer, half warning. You have to stop. You'll drain yourself completely. I can feel it, she breathed. The poison inside you. I can burn it away. Not all at once. It will kill you. but she couldn't stop. The power was flowing too freely, and somewhere in the depths of her consciousness, she could feel Kale's wolf reaching toward her, reaching and recognizing, calling to the luminary within her as if they had known each other across lifetimes. "Mate," something whispered. Not the ancient feminine voice, but something else, something that came from him. The word resonated through her bones, and for one transcendent moment, Verity understood everything. Why she had felt drawn to him at the crossing, why his presence made her pulse race and her skin flush, why the hollow place inside her had finally awakened. Then the light flickered, and exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She collapsed against Kale's chest, her vision swimming. His arms came around her immediately, holding her with desperate tenderness. "Foolish woman," he murmured into her hair. "Brave, magnificent woman." Minutes passed before her vision cleared enough to speak. "Did it work?" "Look." She lifted her head and followed his gaze to the doorway. Draven and his wolves were gone, fled into the night, and when she looked down at Kale's legs, the bandages had fallen away to reveal skin that was merely bruised instead of broken. "Not fully healed," Kale said. "But enough. Enough to fight. Enough to protect you." "How?" "You burned away the worst of the poison. My wolf is still caged, but the chains are weaker now." His hand rose to cup her cheek with heartbreaking gentleness. "You saved me, Verity. Again. You protected me first. I'll always protect you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to examine. Verity became acutely aware of how close they were, how his heart beat strong and steady beneath her palm, how his eyes had faded from gold to gray but still held her reflection like something precious. "Draven will come back," she whispered. "With more wolves. With his alpha. Yes. We can't stay here." "No." Kale's jaw tightened. "There's only one place where you'll be truly safe, but taking you there means revealing truths I'm not ready to share." "What truths?" He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "I'm not who you think I am, Verity. Not a stranger. Not a crippled nobody." His thumb traced her cheekbone with aching tenderness. "And when you learn what I really am, you may wish you had left me to die at that crossing." Before she could respond, a howl split the night. Then another, then a dozen more, rising in eerie harmony from the forest. Kale's expression hardened. "They're calling for reinforcements. We have until dawn." He struggled to his feet, steadier now but still favoring his right leg. "Can you travel?" Verity forced herself upright despite the exhaustion weighing her limbs. "Where are we going?" "North, to the Shadowvale territory." His eyes met hers with something like apology. "To my pack." They traveled through the night and into the gray morning, following paths that seemed to exist only in Kale's memory. Verity's body ached with exhaustion, but she forced herself to keep moving. Every time she stumbled, Kael's hand was there to steady her. Something had shifted between them since the cottage. The careful distance they had maintained was gone, replaced by an awareness that felt almost physical. When their shoulders brushed, Verity's skin tingled. When he spoke her name, warmth bloomed in her chest, and the luminary within her seemed to purr with contentment whenever he was near. "Dangerous," she told herself. "This is dangerous." But she couldn't make herself pull away. By midday, they had crossed into territory Verity didn't recognize. The trees here were older, taller, their branches woven together into a canopy that blocked most of the winter sun. The air smelled different, wilder, ancient. "Shadowvale," Kale said quietly. "The oldest pack territory in the northern realms. You know it well." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "I know every stone and stream. I was born here." Verity absorbed this information. "You're Shadowvale born? Then why were you at the Thornwood Crossing? Why were you alone and injured in Ashmore territory?" The smile faded. "The Thornwood Crossing is named for my family. We've guarded that boundary for 12 generations. Leaving me there to die was the ultimate humiliation." "Leaving you there?" "Who would? My brother." Kale's voice was flat. "Mordecai was always ambitious. I just never believed he would go this far." Pain flickered across his features. "He told me our younger sister Lyra was killed in the coup. Used her death to break me before dumping me at the crossing." "Your own brother did this to you?" "He wanted what I have, what I am." Kale was silent for a moment. "He's probably declared himself king by now. Told the pack I died in an accident or ran like a coward." Verity's head was spinning. "King." The word echoed through her mind. Every interaction, every word, every gentle touch took on new meaning. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed to know if you were real." Kale stepped closer. "Do you understand how rare you are? Verity, a luminary with a heart pure enough to give her last food to a stranger? If I had revealed myself immediately, I would never have known if your kindness was genuine or calculated, so you tested me. I observed you, and what I observed," his voice roughened, "made me certain of something I had only suspected." Certain of what? He was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His hand rose to cup her cheek, and despite everything, despite the revelations, she leaned into his touch. "That you're my mate," Kyle said quietly. "My true mate. The one the moon goddess chose for me before either of us was born." Verity's lungs seized. The luminary within her surged forward, and for an instant, she felt Kale's wolf reaching back. Two souls recognizing each other across a divide that shouldn't exist. Then shouts erupted from the trees ahead, and the moment shattered. Wolves in human form emerged from the forest, a dozen of them, armed with spears and expressions of shock, their eyes fixed on Kale, and Verity watched their faces transform from hostility to disbelief. "My king!" A gray-haired warrior fell to one knee, his voice cracking. "You're alive. Where is Mordecai?" Kale's voice had changed. Gone was the wounded stranger. In his place stood a king, and the authority in his tone made Verity's knees weak. "Mordecai declared you dead 3 days ago, sire. He claimed the throne at moonrise. Anyone who questioned him was what? Executed, my king. 30 wolves dead. The rest are too afraid to speak." Kale's expression went cold. "And my mother? My counsel? Imprisoned, awaiting trial for conspiracy." The warrior's voice broke. "Sire, he's destroyed everything." Kale turned to Verity, and she saw the choice warring in his eyes. His pack was suffering. His people were dying. He had to go to them immediately, but taking her into that chaos would put her directly in Mordecai's path. "You have to go," Verity said before he could speak. "Your people need you. I won't leave you unprotected. I can protect myself. Not against what's coming." He gripped her shoulders. "Mordecai will learn of your existence. A luminary is the one thing that could legitimize his rule. He will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Then let him hunt." Verity lifted her chin. "I survived 3 years alone in hostile territory. I can survive this." "Verity, go save your people, Kale. That's what kings do." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then he pulled her against him, crushing her to his chest with desperate strength. "This isn't goodbye," he growled against her hair. "I will come back for you. I swear it on the moon itself." His lips found her forehead, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. Each touch burned like a brand. Then he was gone, racing into the forest with his warriors, leaving Verity alone in the frozen twilight with the echo of his promise and the growing emptiness where his presence had been. 2 weeks passed like years. Verity had found shelter in an abandoned hunter's cabin at the edge of Shadowvale territory. It was drafty and small, but it kept the snow out, and more importantly, it kept her hidden from the patrols that now swept the northern forests. Mordecai's patrols. His alliance with the Ashmore Alpha had given wolves like Draven access to resources she couldn't evade. Trackers, informants, a network that spanned territories. She had heard the news in fragments, whispers from traveling merchants, gossip exchanged at distant crossings where she traded her herbs for supplies. The usurper king had consolidated power with ruthless efficiency. Any wolf who spoke Kale's name was punished. Any rumor of his survival was crushed. And there were other rumors, darker ones, of a wolf-less Omega who had been seen with the true king before his return, of a bounty that grew larger by the day. Verity kept moving, kept hiding, kept waiting for a sign that Kale had succeeded, that he was coming back for her as he'd promised. But the signs never came, and something else was happening, something she couldn't ignore. It started as a persistent ache in her chest, a hollow sensation that intensified whenever she thought of Kale, which was always. She found herself waking in the night, reaching for a presence that wasn't there, tears streaming down her face without any memory of crying. The dreams were the worst. Every night, she dreamed of him. Sometimes he came to her cabin, wrapped her in his arms, whispered promises against her skin. Those dreams left her breathless and aching. But other nights, she dreamed of blood, of Kale fighting alone against terrible odds, of his body broken on cold stone while a dark-haired stranger stood over him, laughing. She always woke from those dreams screaming. "He is your mate," the ancient voice whispered. "Your soul knows his soul. When he suffers, you suffer. When he bleeds, you bleed. Then why can't I feel if he's alive?" Verity demanded of the empty cabin. "Why can't I sense him?" "Because the bond is incomplete. You have not claimed each other. Without the claiming bite, the connection remains fragile, breakable." Verity pressed her hands to her chest, trying to contain the growing emptiness. The luminary power that had manifested so brilliantly during the attack on her cottage seemed to have retreated, leaving her feeling hollower than before. On the 15th day, everything changed. She was gathering firewood when she heard the approaching footsteps, too heavy to be deer, too deliberate to be casual travelers. Verity dropped her bundle and pressed herself against the nearest tree, barely breathing. 3 figures emerged from the snow-laden pines. Not Shadowvale wolves. Their scent was wrong, carrying the sharp tang of Ashmore territory, and leading them was Draven. "I know you're here, Omega." His voice carried through the silent forest. "My scouts tracked you 3 days ago. Running is pointless." Verity's mind raced. She could try to summon her power, but it had been unpredictable since Kael left. Some days she could barely produce a flicker of light. "Come out peacefully, and I won't hurt you. Much." Draven's smile was audible. "Mordecai wants you alive and relatively undamaged. Something about needing your power to strengthen his claim." He paused. "He's offered me a king's ransom for your capture, more than enough to buy my way into his inner circle." Mordecai. Verity's blood chilled. The usurper knew about her, knew what she was. "Of course," Draven continued. "He doesn't need you completely intact, just alive enough to serve. If you make me chase you, I might have to discipline you first." His companions laughed, and Verity's fear crystallized into something harder, something that felt almost like rage. She had spent 3 years running, 3 years hiding, 3 years accepting the narrative that she was broken, worthless, deserving of exile. "No more." She stepped out from behind the tree. Draven's smile widened. "There's my good little Omega. Now come quietly and—" "No." The word wasn't loud, but it carried power. Verity felt the luminary within surge forward, responding to her defiance. "No?" Draven's expression flickered. "You don't get to say no. You don't have a pack. You don't have an alpha. You don't have— I have myself." Verity's hands began to glow. "I have 3 years of survival that taught me I don't need a pack to have worth. I don't need an alpha to have power. And I certainly don't need your permission to exist." The light intensified, and she saw fear flash across Draven's face. Real fear. The kind he had probably never expected to feel toward the Omega he had once rejected. "Take her!" he snarled at his companions. "Now!" They rushed toward her. Verity threw her hands forward, and moonlight exploded through the forest. But this time, something went wrong. The power surged too fast, too wild, burning through her reserves like fire through dry timber. She managed to drive back 2 of the attackers before her strength gave out completely. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Draven's boot swinging toward her head. When Verity woke, she was in chains. Cold iron bit into her wrists. A damp stone ceiling stretched above her, and through the narrow window of her cell, she could see the towers of a fortress she had only ever heard described in fearful whispers. The Ashmore stronghold in Mordecai, who had made this fortress his base while hunting down any threat to his stolen throne. But as her vision cleared, she realized the cell wasn't empty. A figure slumped against the opposite wall, bound in chains twice as heavy as hers. His clothes were torn and bloody. His dark hair hung lank across his face. But even battered beyond recognition, Verity would have known him anywhere. "Kael," she breathed. He lifted his head slowly, and her heart shattered. His eyes were dull with pain and something worse, hopelessness. The proud Alpha King had been broken in ways that went far beyond physical wounds. Verity. Her name was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I tried to come back for you. I tried." "What happened?" "Mordecai was waiting for me." Each word seemed to cost him. He had allied with the Ashmore Alpha. My own warriors were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. A broken laugh escaped his cracked lips. "I walked into a trap like a fool." Verity strained against her chains. "We'll find a way out. There is no way out." Kael's voice was hollow. "Tomorrow is the blood moon. Mordecai is coming to execute me publicly, to prove once and for all that his claim is legitimate. And you," his voice cracked, "you'll be forced to bond with him. Your luminary power will make him unstoppable. I'll die first." "You might." Kael finally met her eyes, and the anguish in them took her breath away. "And that would be my fault. All of this is my fault. I should never have let you get close. Never should have told you what you were. I put a target on your back because I was selfish enough to want." "To want what?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unspoken. "You," Kael whispered. "I wanted you. From the moment you knelt in the mud and gave me your last food, I knew you were the one I had been waiting for my entire life. Tears carved tracks through the blood on his face. And now you're going to die for it. Verity felt the luminary within her stir. Not with power this time, but with something deeper. Determination. No, daughter. You will not die. And neither will he. The bond, Verity said suddenly. You said it was incomplete. That without the claiming bite, the connection is fragile. Kael's brow furrowed. Yes, but what happens if we complete it? His eyes widened. Verity. No. The claiming bite between an Alpha King and a luminary. The power released would be catastrophic. It could kill us both. Or it could save us both. She strained toward him, chains biting into her wrists. You said luminaries could call even feral wolves back from madness. What if that's exactly what we need? What if completing the bond is the only way to free your wolf from whatever cage Mordecai's poison built? You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to trust me. Verity's voice softened. The way I trusted you. The way I've trusted you since the moment I saw you at that crossing and knew without understanding why, that I was meant to find you. Kael stared at her. In his gray eyes, she watched hope and terror wage war. Outside the cell window, the moon began to rise. Neither of them spoke for a long moment after his confession. There was nothing left to say that their eyes hadn't already communicated. Outside, the blood moon rose like a wound in the sky. Its crimson light spilled through the cell window, painting the stone walls in shades of rust and shadow. Verity could feel its pull in her bones, an ancient call that made the luminary within her stir with restless energy. We don't have much time, she said, straining against her chains. How do we do this? The claiming bite? Kael's expression was torn between desperate hope and equally desperate fear. You don't understand what you're proposing. A claiming bond isn't just physical. It's the merging of two souls. Every thought, every memory, every wound I carry would become yours, and yours would become mine. I'm not afraid of your wounds. You should be. His voice cracked. I've done terrible things, Verity. Made terrible choices. The weight of a kingdom has been on my shoulders since I was 18 years old. If you see inside me, truly see, you might not what? Love you? The word hung between them like a held breath. Kael went very still. You don't know me well enough to love me. I know that you protected me when you could barely stand. I know that you looked at me like I mattered when everyone else saw only a broken omega. I know that when you touch me, something inside me recognizes something inside you. Verity's voice softened. I don't need years to know what my soul already understands. Verity, tell me how to complete the bond. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. The moonlight caught his eyes and turned them silver, and Verity saw the moment his resistance crumbled. The bite must be mutual, he said quietly. I claim you, you claim me. At the same moment, under the witness of the moon. He paused. But we're chained. We can't reach each other. Verity looked at the distance between them. 8 feet of cold stone. A gap that seemed beyond crossing. But the blood moon was rising, and she could feel its crimson light strengthening the fragile thread between them. Proximity and lunar power might be enough. She closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for the luminary power that had failed her in the forest. It flickered weakly, exhausted from her earlier attempt. But beneath the exhaustion, she felt something else. The bond that already existed between them, fragile and incomplete, but real. She followed that thread. Kael, she thought, pushing the word toward him with everything she had. His sharp intake of breath told her it had worked. You can hear me. I can feel you. His mental voice was rough with wonder. How is this possible? The bond. It's already there. We just need to strengthen it. She opened her eyes and found him staring at her with an expression that made her chest ache. The chains, she said aloud. Can you break them if your wolf is freed? If my wolf is freed, I could tear down this entire castle. A ghost of his old confidence flickered across his features. But the poison, I'll burn it away. All of it. The way I started to in my cottage. That nearly killed you. This time I won't be fighting alone. Verity held his gaze. This time I'll have your strength to draw from. That's what the bond does, isn't it? Makes us stronger together? Kael was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. If we're going to do this, he said, we do it now, before Mordecai arrives. Verity closed her eyes again and reached for her power. This time, instead of pushing outward, she sent it across the bond toward Kael. She felt his wolf immediately, caged and desperate, wrapped in chains of dark poison. But she could also feel something else. His love for her. It blazed beneath his fear, fierce and undeniable. She let that love anchor her as she began to burn. The light built slowly at first, then faster, pouring through the fragile bond like water through a breaking dam. Verity felt Cale's pain as the poison fought back, felt his wolf howling for freedom, felt his heart reaching for hers across the cold stone. Then something snapped. A sound like chains breaking echoed through the cell. Though neither of them had moved, Cale threw his head back with a roar that wasn't entirely human, and Verity watched in amazement as his body began to shift. Not fully, not completely, but enough. His muscles swelled, his eyes blazed gold, and when he wrenched his arms apart, the iron chains shattered like brittle ice. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and fell to his knees before her. His hands, trembling with barely contained power, cupped her face. "Now," he breathed. "Before I lose control." His mouth found the curve of her neck, and Verity tilted her head to give him access. At the same moment, she pressed her lips to his throat, feeling the wild pulse beneath his skin. They bit down together. The world exploded. Pain and pleasure merged into something beyond either. Verity felt Cale's essence pour into her like molten silver, filling every hollow place she had ever known. His memories crashed over her in waves, a childhood of duty and expectation, the weight of a crown he never asked for, the loneliness of a king who trusted no one, and beneath it all, the moment he had first seen her at the crossing, the shock of recognition that had stopped his heart. She's the one, he had thought. Moon help me. She's the one. In return, she gave him everything. Her years of rejection, her quiet determination to survive, the first stirring of the ancient voice when his fevered eyes met hers. The love that had grown in spite of every reason it shouldn't. Their wolves met in the space between their souls and recognized each other with joy so fierce it was almost savage. "Mate," his wolf sang. "Mate," hers answered. The bond snapped into place with a force that shook the foundations of the castle. Verity gasped as power flooded through her, more than she had ever contained. It wasn't just her luminary light anymore. It was Cale's strength, his wolf's ancient ferocity, the accumulated power of a royal bloodline stretching back centuries. She barely felt the chains fall from her wrists. Cale pulled back from her throat, and she saw blood on his lips, her blood, gleaming in the crimson moonlight. His eyes were pure gold now, his features caught somewhere between man and wolf. "We need to move," he growled. Mordecai will have felt that. As if summoned by his name, footsteps thundered in the corridor outside, shouting voices, the clash of weapons. Cale was on his feet instantly, pulling Verity up beside him. The cell door burst open, and 3 guards rushed in with drawn swords. They never stood a chance. Cale moved like lightning made flesh. 1 guard went down before he could raise his weapon. Another followed a heartbeat later. The 3rd managed a single swing before Cale's hand closed around his throat and lifted him off the ground. "Where is Mordecai?" The guard choked, his feet kicking uselessly. "The Great Hall," he gasped, preparing for the execution ceremony. Cale dropped him without another glance. He turned to Verity, and she saw the battle raging behind his eyes. The wolf wanted blood, wanted vengeance, wanted to tear through every enemy between here and his treacherous brother. "Go," she said. "I'll follow. I won't leave you again." "You're not leaving me. You're running ahead." She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. "I can feel you now. Wherever you go, I'll find you." Cale's jaw clenched. Then he leaned down and kissed her with fierce desperation. "If you're not beside me when I face Mordecai, I'm coming back for you. I would expect nothing less." He vanished into the corridor like a storm given form. Verity took a breath, steadied herself, and followed. The castle was in chaos. Word of their escape had spread, and wolves were shifting in the hallways, their howls echoing off the ancient stones. Verity ran past them all, guided by the golden thread of the bond that led her toward Cale, like a compass pointing north. She found the Great Hall by following the sounds of battle. The doors had been torn from their hinges. Inside, Cale fought in full wolf form, a massive silver beast that dwarfed every opponent. Bodies littered the floor, and the survivors were falling back in terror. But at the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, stood 2 figures. One was a dark-haired man with Cale's features twisted into something cruel. Mordecai, the usurper king. The other was Draven, his hand wrapped around the throat of a small, struggling figure. Verity's heart stopped. It was a child, a girl no older than 8, with the same silver-gray eyes as Cale. Lyra, his sister who was supposed to be dead. "Stop," Mordecai commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Stop, or my wolf tears out her throat." Cale's massive form went rigid. Slowly, painfully, he shifted back to human form, his golden eyes fixed on the child. "Lyra," he breathed. You told me she was dead. You told me. I told you what I needed you to believe. Mordecai's smile was poison. Our little sister has been my insurance policy all along. Now, brother, you're going to kneel before these witnesses and renounce your claim to the throne, or you're going to watch her die. Verity saw Cale's shoulders bow, saw the fight drain from his posture. He would do it, she realized. He would give up everything to save his sister. No. The word blazed through her mind with the force of a thunderclap. She stepped into the hall, and every eye turned to her. Mordecai's smile faltered as he took in the blood still wet on her throat, the matching mark that gleamed on Cale's neck. The claiming bite, he whispered. You actually completed. Let the child go. Verity's voice wasn't loud, but it resonated with power that made the stones tremble. The luminary had fully merged with her now, and she could feel the moon itself watching through her eyes. Or what? Mordecai recovered quickly, his sneer returning. You'll glow at me? I've heard about your parlor tricks, Omega. They won't save you here. I wasn't talking to you. Verity's gaze shifted to Draven, the enforcer who had tormented her for years, the wolf who had rejected her as worthless. She reached across the distance between them, following the same pathway she had used to connect with Kyle, and touched Draven's mind. Draven's eyes went wide. His hand spasmed open, releasing Lyra's throat. The child scrambled away as the enforcer fell to his knees, clutching his head. What are you doing to him? Mordecai demanded. Showing him the truth. Verity walked forward, and with each step her power grew, showing him every rejection, every cruelty, every moment he made me feel less than nothing. She stopped before Draven's trembling form, and showing him what I became despite all of it. Draven looked up at her, and his face was wet with tears. I'm sorry, he choked. I didn't know. Verity looked down at the wolf who had tormented her for years. She could feel his regret through the connection she had forced open, could see the memories cascading through his mind, every cruelty recontextualized through her eyes. He had been afraid of being mocked for bonding with a defective Omega, afraid of losing status. His cruelty had been cowardice wearing armor. I know. Verity's voice softened. And I forgive you. Not for your sake, for mine. I won't carry your weight anymore. She turned away from him and faced Mordecai. The usurper had drawn a knife, the blade gleaming with the same dark poison that had once caged Cale's wolf. Stay back, he snarled. I'll kill you. Cale hit him like an avalanche. The brothers crashed across the dais in a tangle of limbs and fury. The poisoned knife skittered away as they fought, two wolves in human skin, battling for dominance as ancient instinct demanded. But Cale was no longer caged, no longer broken. The fight was brutal but brief. When Cale rose from his brother's unconscious form, his chest heaving and his eyes still blazing gold, a silence fell over the hall. It's over, he said. Mordecai will face justice for his crimes. Anyone who stood with him can choose now. Kneel and accept my mercy, or run and be hunted. One by one, the remaining wolves dropped to their knees. Cale turned to Verity, and the fierceness in his face melted away. The king became the man who had touched her face by the firelight, who had whispered promises against her skin, who had claimed her as she had claimed him. He crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. You magnificent woman, he murmured against her hair. You saved us all. We saved each other. A small hand tugged at Verity's borrowed cloak. She looked down to find Lyra gazing up at her with wonder. Are you my brother's mate? The child asked. Verity glanced at Cale, who was watching her with an expression that made her heart overflow. Yes, she said softly. I suppose I am. Good. Lyra's face broke into a brilliant smile. I always wanted a sister. As the blood moon reached its zenith, Verity stood in the great hall of her enemies and felt something she had never expected to feel again. Home. Not a place, not a pack, but a person. Cale's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. My queen, he whispered, the title a promise and a prayer. Verity smiled. The rejected Omega, the wolf-less outcast, the luminary reborn. She had spent years believing she was broken, empty, unworthy, but standing beside her mate, surrounded by wolves who knelt before her light, she finally understood the truth. She had never been broken. She had simply been waiting to be found.